Joining me on Startup Report today is Mitch Neff and Shane Needham. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
You guys are both involved in a lot of startup stuff, both together or sometimes things together, some things separately. So I'm excited to dig into those. We'll start with the StartupBus, which you've been running it now for the last 6-8 years.
Yeah.
So let's dig into StartupBus a little bit. How did that get started, and how's it been for the last 8 years?
Sure. So StartupBus is an interesting organization, I think, to say the least. That was started in 2010. It was basically in a bar one night. A bunch of guys were like, "Hey, why don't we come up with an awesome way to go to South by Southwest this year? And we will get a bus. We'll get a bunch of our friends, and we're going to launch some startups on the way. We're going to make a road trip out of this, and it's going to be a lot of fun." In the course of doing that, a little bit of attention got put on it. TechCrunch got a hold of it, a couple other papers. It's kind of a crazy idea. Let's load a bunch of people onto a bus, and we're going to launch startups in 3 days on the way to a tech conference.
Now, do you have a couple startups in the works that you were already on that formed the core of that idea, or do you literally just say, let's go find some random startups?
All net new. It was all net new stuff. So it's people that come together, and we'll get into that in a second, like how the bus actually goes. It's kind of an interesting flow, and I think the most interesting thing about it is how it has not changed over the last 10 years, because it's something that kind of works for us. So that first year, there was like 15 guys that got on this bus, and they went from San Francisco over to Austin, Texas for South by Southwest. The next year, just before South by, some of the people that had gotten a hold of this story and thought it was kind of a novel and interesting idea, like TechCrunch and some of the other tech press, HuffPost did a story, said, "Hey, are you guys doing this again?" And Elia, who was the original ideator of StartupBus, was like, "Well, I hadn't really thought about it, but well, heck, instead of just doing it again, let's do 6 buses this year." So then we had the birth of this competition. The second year, we had 6 buses from around the country, all racing toward Austin, Texas. Every single bus full of strangers, all of them building a startup in 72 hours on the road. And the cool thing was, from that first year on, if you didn't have something that worked, you didn't really get on stage to pitch in the finals. Like, there's a no slide decks rule. There's a no existing technology rule. Like, so if you've been working on something forever, or your code base is a couple years old, you're like, we think you brought some of this in. Like, that's not what we're looking for here. The big thing about StartupBus, for how hard the competition is, for how hard the selection process is, we've never given a damn about the startups that are involved in StartupBus. It is not about startups at all. It's about people. Like, we don't build companies. We build people. You have 72 hours to go way further beyond your limits than you thought you could ever possibly get, and realize that I can't believe that this has all happened in 3 days on the road.
How does that express itself? I mean, you've been on the bus too, Shane. What are some of the transformations or some of the things you could articulate that show that?
So I got involved the 3rd year, so they kind of figured it out by then, and I think you guys probably hit a few mistakes under the guise of making it interesting for people, but that year, that bus trip will always be a point on my continuum I'll point to, because Mitch is right. Is even though, like, we got off the bus at the end of that and had full intention of, like, seeing this company through, and we still talk about it. It wasn't about the company itself. It was about what it allowed you to see you were capable of, and that's why I continue to be involved, because it had such an imprint on me. I just, anything I can do to help anyone get that same imprint, or even a derivative of that experience, is pretty incredible. Because I got on the bus, I had no idea what was happening, and then 72 hours later, I had already been going to South by that year, so I already booked my flight return. I was sitting in the airport listening to the finals, and they announced that our team won 2nd place out of, 55 teams that year?
Yeah.
So it was an incredible experience.
I think it was 50. It was someplace around it. That was the biggest year we ever did.
12 buses that year.
Yeah, that was the big. Never again. Never after that. We did 12 buses one time. Never again.
And how many different cities were these originating from?
So there was 12 that year.
12 cities, 1 bus a city.
Yes. So we went from 1 to 6 to 12 to let's never, ever, ever under any circumstances do 12 again. And then it kind of showed out like 6 seems to be the sweet spot. Like 6 to 8 seems to be the real sweet spot for how to running an effective competition.
And so was the logistics of the competition. Obviously, I'm assuming you found local partners in each city to do the logistics of the actual bus itself. And
Yeah, we have become friends with a lot of people who own motor coaches. Like we have a couple companies that we use, usually use for that. But the big cost is obviously like motor coaches are really expensive to rent for days on end. Getting 150 to 250 people from point A to point B is always kind of a pricey thing.
I'm assuming that the down payments or the security deposits went up every year as you.
Nope.
No.
So there are a couple of companies who stopped returning our calls, but they've never been to it. We have a great partner, Dane in New York.
Mhm.
He has always come through for us, always helped us find a bunch of great motor coaches to help satisfy that. And then Ray Land up in North Florida has been since the beginning friend of StartupBus. So we have a couple good sources that we usually have been able to get the buses from without too much trouble.
Yeah.
Although the year we did 12, that was crazy.
Yeah.
The thing is, the hard part is like when we pick where we're going to go each year, it's like, how do we make these routes equitable? Like how do we make it so like California doesn't have like the longest drive imaginable and the New York bus is just going down to Boston or something like that. So in the last 3 years, we've found a home in New Orleans. And so that's been kind of a challenge for like the Florida bus. Since that first year, actually the year I rode, the bus came out of Miami. And then the next year I moved the bus up to Tampa and it's stayed here since because we're Tampa Bay. Like, we need the bus. So getting the bus from Tampa Bay area, Central Florida area over to New Orleans and still like not making it too easy is because it's got to be a grind, right? Like we're breaking people down and rebuilding them a different way. So it can't be an easy trip.
Right.
Like that's always the thing.
And so it feels like that. I mean, the idea was born in the bar, and
As many great ideas are.
yes, and I'm assuming at that time there wasn't a stated goal of breaking people down and building. That became a happy byproduct of the experiment. But when you say that, looking back at it, that's that kind of personal transformation there's a lot of that personal development. There's a lot of from Tony Robbins to Gary Vee and all the people that are digging into that space and of themselves. Were you able just to leave it as, we know if we pack you all into this bus and apply pressure, this good stuff's going to happen just because of the nature of the environment? Or how many tweaks did you have to make to make sure that was a good positive experience and people came back with their sanity intact?
Have we ever made sure people came back with their sanity intact?
I don't think that was a stated goal.
No.
I mean, I think for the most part, it happens. You're going to have more experience on this than I will, but I know. So after 2012, what was it, 2014, I was at a Christmas party with Mitch, and he just started introducing me to everybody in the Christmas party as next year's conductor. So I got kind of Mitched into conducting the bus in 15 with my buddy Ryan, who was also my partner on the original concept when we rode. So we co-conducted the bus that year. And that was the first year we didn't go to South by. So it was a little bit of a transitional year. We went to Nashville. But I think it was more just finding more interesting and appropriate pressures to apply.
Right.
Because as the route changes, as things change within the dynamics of the people on the bus, that year we didn't have a strong showing here in Tampa in terms of people getting on the bus. And I think California was a little light that year.
Yep.
So California went from San Francisco to Nevada to Las Vegas.
Yeah, they went down to Vegas.
And then right after their kind of visit in Vegas with a couple entrepreneurship centers there, they got on a plane, met us in Atlanta, and we consolidated buses to go the rest of the trip.
We never told the San Francisco bus that they were getting on an airplane, which produced its own interesting problems, but that's a story for another day.
Hopefully everybody had their driver's license.
Yeah. It was like, we're getting on it. Nobody mentioned we were going through TSA or going to the airport here, guys.
I'm going to go to the restroom. I'll be back.
Yeah. I'll be back in 5 minutes. I just...
well, then furthermore, we didn't tell the Florida team that they were coming. And so actually when the Florida team came out of the hotel that night, there were just a bunch of random people on their bus, and you had to figure it out.
Switching up pressures.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, that was kind of born of, there are that first year. I've actually done the Western route. My conductor year, the year I conducted a bus out of Stanford University. So we came through New Mexico and did that route. There's a large stretch of absolutely nothing that is longer than you can imagine, and it's called West Texas. There's literally nothing in West Texas, including internet. So if you think you're going to get 3G signal out
That's a
there,
pressure
even
I'm not gonna
3G, you know,
handle,
it's not
yeah.
happening. So like some of those pressures were born. The Florida bus would always have to deal with when we were going to Texas. We'd have to deal with like going through like Mississippi and Alabama, like where there's like not just as much data coverage and
Right.
you wouldn't get internet, and there was a lot of pressures around that. So we started thinking about like other ways we could introduce some of these challenges early on. So we kind of started a process of, okay, here's the milestones that you need to hit. Milestones are a big piece of the bus. They keep you on target and let you know, like, as long as you keep hitting your milestones, you're going to hit the end of this and you're going to be in good shape and you're going to be ready to pitch. So there is a unofficial indoctrinated curriculum that has come up with the bus and has kind of evolved as the program has evolved. And we find that it works. And I led this shit forever. I don't know why. I just don't know why it works,
Yeah.
but it keeps working every year. And it's this formula where you take people who are relative strangers, or at least most of them are relative strangers. You probably have a couple buddies, few sets of friends that get on the bus together. But you have 30 people who are relative strangers. Everybody gets on the bus first thing in the morning, has no idea what they're doing. It's early in the morning. You are embarking on a 3-day road trip and then a couple days in New Orleans. So you have no idea what you've really signed up for here.
Right.
And some guy or girl with way too much energy stands up in front of the bus and starts introducing themselves and tells you, okay, here's what we're going to do. First things first, every single one of you is going to get up, you're going to introduce yourself, and you're going to make a pitch. And then we're going to stop for lunch. And that's how we're going to do this. And that's how the bus starts every single year. Everybody has to introduce themselves, break that ice, break down the barriers early on, make a pitch, even if it's a ridiculous pitch.
Right.
You have to make a pitch. As soon as everybody completes that, some people sometimes want to make a couple pitches, but as soon as everybody completes their pitch, we stop the bus and everybody gets out of the bus and kind of groups up. And if your idea is kind of like similar to mine, I might want to talk to you and be like, hey, what do you think? We could probably put these together, and, you're a designer, I'm a developer. We could really make this work. And, we got 72 hours. Let's do this. So everybody puts themselves into a group and into a team. Oddly, always 4 to 6 teams a bus. Can't figure that out either. We have never put a cap on how many. Even the year we had an 11-person team on one bus, there were still 5 other teams. I don't know why it works or why that happens, but it's like 4 to 6 teams per bus.
And it's just watching it happen every single time. I mean, it sounds unnatural that everybody's going to kind of just figure it out. It just happens. It just happens. 4 or 5 people align and they move forward.
Interesting. I mean, it's probably, there's a lot of elements of the psychology you could dig into, when you put people in a situation that's enclosed,
everybody's already off balance.
Camp, and then you put the pressure on, which then, and they have to find a way to express that pressure. And the common language is already something they're passionate about, which is the startup space. So now you're expressing that pressure with that commonality, which is, if people go to camp together, they end up talking the same by the end of the summer or the week or whatever. And so it is a nice recipe for that, and who knows, the group sizes, a lot of it, it's just one of those awkward things, so like when people go into college classrooms and they tend to go in a certain place and stay there. And usually it's, who should I go with? And there's 4 people there and 2 people there. So that becomes a path of least resistance to go to the one with 2. And so you just naturally it's less intimidating to go to the one with 4.
Yeah.
And so, it's just sometimes insecurity can help you organize in that way and stuff.
I always kind of figured early on that like this would be a process that would be dominated by extroverts, by the marketers and biz dev people who are like really like gregarious and outgoing, but it's not the way it actually works out a lot of the time. A lot of the time you'll see the guys, we call them hustlers, we call them marketers, or, growth hackers, whatever we call them. We see them looking to find the person and follow their lead who can build the tech that they have in their head. I had assumed that the introvert, extrovert, dominant versus passive personality traits would really express themselves there. But it's not really the case. Like it really works out to be very egalitarian process that like people are like, okay, you have value, I have value. Can we make this work together? And that's kind of always been like a social issue that we've always felt very strongly about is like, just there's a quality in who gets on the bus. And we mean that by what they do, whether we've broken it down into like 3 primary disciplines that are really, really strong and really, really necessary for a startup game like this. That's, the designers that make things usable pretty. That's UX, that's art, creative, all the creative types. You have your developers who actually build the technology. They make things actually work in real life. And then you have your biz dev folks who can sell the idea. So we used to call them hackers, hipsters, and hustlers. We've gotten away from that verbiage the last few years, and just gone with more like designers, developers, and biz dev. It takes those three people to do this in 72 hours. You have to have something that is built and works. You have to have something that's pretty and usable and people are going to want to log into and use.
Right.
And you have to develop traction. So you have to have all three of these skill sets. It's very rare you find somebody who embodies all three of those talents. There are a few bona fide triple threats that I have seen come through, but they're just very, very few and far between. Usually have a designer that can code, a UX person, or you'll have a developer that can actually go sell a product.
All right.
Those people are dangerous, by the way. and then you have people who are just really, really good at the one thing that they do, and they're looking for somebody who complements their skill.
Yeah. And it's funny because that's probably at the core of every good company, are those that is that triangle, right? Essentially, and then it just grows into bigger versions of that, and just being put into that environment, just the rawest pieces of it come out. I also love the way I'm showing my age, but throwback to the the Ken Kesey "Are You on the Bus?" And there's some the Beats and even Grateful Dead, all those folks. So the bus came by and I got on, and so the way you say it, the year I rode, and on the bus and that sort of thing. It's there's a powerful history of that sort of being moving across the country and together and being on the bus. And and it's a cliche for a reason, but it's cool.
And there is, I mean, I think even with startup, I mean, the alumni that now spans how many continents? Because you would do this in Europe.
Europe, Asia, Australia, North America.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We tried Africa, and then that kind of got stalled a little bit.
That was a difficult one. Who knew hostile borders in a road trip would be so difficult?
Yeah, you had to get up ahead of steam to get through those, right?
Or a lot of cash.
You haven't had to kick anybody off and say, "Hey, just keep him." And
I think
you barely got on the bus, bro.
But yeah, the alumni and just the community that surrounds it. I mean, it's sometimes very active, or it's as active as you participate in it. But I mean, to this day, I mean, you see people come across the Facebook community and some of the Slack groups, and still supporting each other, even though they're on the third or fourth thing since they were on the bus. So
let's finish up. I want to dig into some of the stuff you guys are doing individually. So then, when's the next run? When's the next ride? When's the next journey happening? And
I have specific
You have
instructions
specific
from
dates?
Akira. Yes. So let me make sure I hit all of Akira's talking points before Akira Mitchell and Nick Price are going to be your conductors this year from the Tampa region. You can always apply at StartupBus.com. Okay. Hit the website. The bus runs July 24th through 28th. I don't know where the bus will be leaving from. We have traditionally left from the Sail Pavilion in downtown Tampa, but that can move around. Get your registration in at StartupBus.com. StartupBus is also always looking for sponsors. That's one thing that we've always been very mindful of, is to keep the ticket price as low as possible. We don't want to make StartupBus about who can afford to get on the bus. We want to make StartupBus about the people who are just crazy enough to get on this bus and do this thing. So we've always tried to keep that ticket price absolutely as low as possible. We offset that. Hillsborough County has been fantastic the last 6 years in supporting StartupBus locally here at home. But any startups, any companies in the area, any companies nationwide that want to help support the next generation of entrepreneurs, even $100 is helpful. Even $300 can put a rider on the bus. So I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do for not a lot of money and just get some bang for your buck.
Also, if there's people out there that want to go and want to find out how to get their company to pay for their trip, don't hesitate to get in touch, because we've got tools for that as well.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a great development tool.
It really is. It really is. And to what you were saying earlier, I want to close off on the actual value of StartupBus is the community, right? That's like being a part of this group that has, I don't know how many billions in valuation now. I stopped counting years ago at like 3.5 billion in total valuation for startups. Not necessarily that were started on the bus, but were started by people who met on the bus. Right. So alumni have come together to build companies like Instacart and Listener and big companies you've heard of. Were born from people who came together on StartupBus. So it's about that alumni community. It's about having that shared experience. Kind of like, to your point, feels like you have a little bit of a battle buddy thing going on after you both like go through this and get off the bus together. maybe it's like a PTSD type of thing or that kind of thing. But there is this bonding experience. I've often joked our core competency is inducing Stockholm syndrome. Like people love the fact that they had this experience and they love each other for going through it
It's
together.
that trench mentality. When you've served with somebody, when you've had this experience. I mean, if I look around, like even the year that I was on the bus, I mean, that was the year Linda Olson from Tampa Bay Way was on the bus. Schwagler, Nathan Schwagler from the Dolly.
Susie was your conductor, wasn't she?
No,
Greg
Greg
was your
Ross.
conductor.
Greg Ross Monroe from Source
Oh,
Toad.
that was the year that with the pullover.
Yep.
Oh, that was a good prank. We have to do that one again sometime. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'll tell you about that one after we wrap up. It was hilarious.
But yeah, I mean, some prominent people and some people who have gone on to do some very good things, and some people that are really good collaborators as well.
I also want to dig in. You both individually have cool things that you're doing that I want to give a little bit of love to because they're very interesting. So, Mitch, you are you run external comms for Cisco Talos, which is the all things security.
So we are the brain trust, I guess, behind the threat research and threat intelligence of Cisco Security. Incidentally, we do have our own podcast, Beers with Talos. Got to plug that.
Sure.
Kind of against the rules if you don't.
Yeah.
So it's a big group, about 350 men and women who are really dedicated to protecting the internet at large. I mean, it's not just Cisco's customers that benefit from what we do there.
We had Marcin in from Malwarebytes, and obviously they have software. And if you've seen the very interesting documentary on John from
John McAfee?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That might be a good topic for your next Beers with Talos podcast. But so how do you play sort of in that space? I know you're communicating out when you find threats. Are these threats that are strictly virus malware stuff, or what other types of threats?
So no, I mean really anything that is. We actually work a little on the offensive side too. I mean, we have a big vuln discovery program that's actively looking for problems in software that companies and people use all the time. But it's not just the viruses and the malware. We have obviously a huge firewall business, a huge access control business, all these different security products. I'm totally the wrong guy to ask about those. I know nothing about the products. I'm going to tell you that like Talos is an engineering org. We do what we can on the product side, but we really don't do much. But what we do is we make those products smarter. So if you have a firewall or your wireless control, your email, your email appliance, any of that stuff is constantly getting updates, and those updates are coming from us. So every time we find a new threat out in the wild, we're developing all of the signatures and all of the rules and all of the different detection methodologies and pushing those out to products in real time.
Right.
So it's a threat intelligence feed that automatically updates your products is the best way to look at it, I guess.
And one of the interesting things when I dug into this world with Marcin was that you define the really the stuff that's happening or about to happen. A lot of that exists in a lot of the forums and a lot of the conversations that happen. There's the dark web and all these different things like that. So how much do you have to actually dig into that world? And then, with him and the forums he was on, how much of it do you wonder if the people in your communication channels might be, negative operators or whatever?
We have a very large intelligence and interdiction group inside Talos, and they deal a lot with what you're talking about, like dealing with the dark web, the forums, and that kind of stuff. The fact is, like, most companies and most people haven't really earned the right to be too worried about that just yet.
Right.
So, like, and one of my coworkers, Matt, likes to always say, like, you haven't earned the right to be worried about APT, like an advanced persistent threat. As long as Dave in accounting will click on literally effing anything, there is no reason you need to be worried about advanced threats, like, because 90% of it is coming through the same way it has. And we see cycles, we see differences. We see what's old's new, what's new is old, and we definitely see cycles in this business. What people need to realize is that cybercrime is now operating identically to legitimate business. Like, these are big businesses that we're dealing with. Some of them are nation state supported, some of them are private groups, but these are big groups, and they're organized, and they're always iterating, and they're applying a lot of the same stuff that we see in startup culture to their small enterprise. They're hustling harder, man. Like, we just have to keep up and do the same.
Well, and, on the flip side of that, if you think about, if you have organized crime in New York City and you go and try to disrupt that, there are usually consequences to that. And so another question, I mentioned was, obviously one player in your organization could cost, a potentially connected criminal millions of dollars if they shut them down.
We do.
And so what do you guard for as far as consequences from poking the bear there?
I mean, it was a little tongue in cheek, but there were many years that our tagline was pissing off the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like that's just literally what we would do. And like, and there is a lot of validity to the economic disruption model.
Mhm.
If I am Cisco, I guarantee you I can outspend them.
Mhm.
And if I keep making this more and more and more expensive for them, eventually they're going to call uncle and they're going to stop trying. They're going to move on and pull up and go do something else.
Right.
Um,
Except for the nation states. I mean, that's
right.
yeah.
Those are pretty well-funded dudes, but they're doing a little bit of a different game up at that level anyway. So, I mean, there's, you have economically motivated actors and you have, like chaos, confusion, and mayhem oriented actors. So with a nation state group, there's a lot of different considerations that you're going to have than an economically motivated actor. With an economically motivated actor, you just keep destroying their infrastructure, and then they'll keep making it less usable.
Right.
Make those IPs go away, sinkhole those domains, do whatever you can that it makes it unusable, and eventually they have to try something different because what they're doing gets too costly.
Huh. So you use the word sinkhole, and that just jumped into my head. Is that, I mean, with Cisco being a lot of the backbone of the internet, if you knew an IP was a bad player, you could blank them from being allowed
That's
past
not
the internet.
theoretical. I mean, that
That's what you
happens
do.
constantly.
Yeah. So yeah, it's cool. That's a powerful position to be in.
It really is. Kind of a funny story. We have a certain trophy that gets distributed around work for somebody who makes a massive bonehead move. There may be a couple people who've received that for accidentally blacklisting large, huge other domains, even for only a few seconds before it was caught. But like with great power comes great responsibility, right? So like you have to be very careful when you're doing these things. But it is an awesome power and it is an awesome privilege to be able to find something for our DRT guys and be like, hey, this whole net block is nothing but malicious trash.
Mhm.
And let's just make that not exist. Like, let's just null route all of that.
Right.
That goes to Cisco pages now.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Cool. All
It's
right.
fun.
So just do that exact same thing, except make them go to pitch list and catalyst pages, and we'll call it a day.
That's actually a startup marketing method that has not been thought of. Like sinkholes is a service, and like just rerouting traffic back to your like.
Let's talk after this.
We're not even on a bus. And Shane, so you, in addition to the startup bus, you also spent a lot of time with Wave, Tampa Bay Wave. And
Yeah, I'm on the board there. I've played a couple roles there, but now just they've confined my damage control to the board. So, but happy to help out there with communications and marketing and that sort of thing. It's a great organization, just like so many in the area that are kind of bringing our ecosystem to a national level, to where we're starting to get national recognition for the ecosystem that supports startup and entrepreneurship.
as seen by the Linda's big role in the startup,
Rise to the rest.
Rise of the Rest coming recently, which was, I think, enjoyed by all.
Yes.
That's good. And since then you've taken your skill set and articulated it as co-conspirator.
Yeah. So after about 18 years in the advertising agency world, which is a great career to have if you don't want to grow up in a meaningful way, you get to play with a lot of fun toys and do a lot of fun things for some people with some big budgets. But I've taken that, moved on, and gone a little bit more independent and working to provide kind of agency level talent to companies that probably wouldn't necessarily be able to access or afford that. So bringing the talent of creatives and strategy folks and good communicators that are increasingly going independent and doing freelance and bringing those together to smaller companies in an accessible way, but then also bringing maybe a more sustainable lifestyle to those market talent people. So, just got started probably December of last year and growing with about 4 clients. So
Wonderful. And what's the URL?
coconspirator.co.
.co. Love the CO. We're there too. Cool. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation. I think you're there. You are.
Oh, couldn't see behind these sweet microphones. I actually
You sinkholed yourself on that podcast.
well, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
thanks
was
for
a
having
good
us,
learning
Joe.
Pleasure to
experience.
be here. StartupBus.com.
Mm-hmm.
Beers with
And
Talos
Beers
and
with Talos.
co-conspirator.co.
You got it.
Co-conspirator.co.
Co-conspirator.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
Cheers.
Thank you, Joe.
See ya.